To my daughter who finally found a man desperate enough. My father said it with a raised glass and a wide smile while 60 guests sat frozen at my own engagement party. The silence that followed wasn't polite or awkward. It was sharp and heavy, the kind where you could hear someone swallow across the room. My fiancé's hand tightened under the table, and I felt him start to stand, but I gripped his arm and kept him seated. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I calmly walked to the front of the room, opened my laptop and projected one document onto the screen. My father's business partner of 15 years dropped his champagne glass, and it shattered across the marble floor. That crack echoed louder than anything my father had just said. It sounded like his reputation breaking in real time. But this didn't begin at the party. It began 3 months earlier, the night I found numbers in my father's company records that were never meant for my eyes. My name is Danielle Upton. I'm 29 years old and I work as a forensic accountant. If this story connects with you, take a second to like and subscribe and feel free to share where you're watching from in the local time. Now let me take you back to last October, the last time my father called me a charity case. Richard Upton built his construction company from nothing. One pickup truck, a small loan sealed with a handshake and years of long days. By the time I was born, Upton and Marsh Construction had a dozen employees, several trucks and a strong reputation in town. People admired him. At barbecues, church fundraisers and country club dinners, he was the generous, confident businessman everyone respected. At home it was different. He didn't need to raise a hand. His calm voice could shrink you without ever getting loud. I was 9 when I first felt it clearly. I brought home straight A's and a glowing note from my teacher, placing the report card on the counter like it was proof I mattered. He barely glanced at it. Good grades don't mean you're smart, Danielle. Teachers feel sorry for kids sometimes. My mother, Linda, sat nearby, sipping coffee, saying nothing. That was the pattern. He cut, she stayed quiet, and I learned to swallow the hurt. What made it confusing was that he wasn't harsh every day. When I was 12, he taught me to ride a bike, and when I made it to the end of the street without falling, he said, "That's my girl." I held on to those words for years. Later, I realized he'd said them while neighbors watched from the driveway. I had performed well, he had taken the spotlight. That was his version of pride, the kind that required an audience. As I grew older, the pattern didn't stop. It just became more polished. At my college graduation, where I earned honors in accounting with a minor in criminal justice after working 2 jobs to keep my grades up, my hands shook as I crossed the stage. My parents were there. My father wore his best suit, ready for the photos. After graduation, we went to a steakhouse I could never have paid for on my own. His choice, of course. For 45 minutes straight, my father talked to my college friends about his newest city contract, barely asking me a single question. My friends kept glancing my way, unsure how to react, and I kept smiling like everything was fine. When the bill came, he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, Danielle, let's hope that diploma is worth more than the paper it's printed on." The table laughed because when Richard Upton makes a joke, people laugh. That's how it works. A year later, I got my first real job at a respected forensic accounting firm. Competitive, hard-earned, something I was proud of. I called home to share the news. My mom said a quick congratulations. My dad got on the phone and said, "Let's hope you don't bankrupt them." I laughed out of habit, thanked him, hung up, and then sat alone in my car for 20 minutes. The hardest part. I thought that was normal. When you grow up surrounded by constant criticism, you stop noticing how much it hurts. You assume that's just how love sounds. It wasn't until Nathan that someone gently showed me a different reality. On our 3rd date, I told a story about my dad joking at my cousin's wedding that I'd be next to Mary, if anyone would have her. I expected Nathan to laugh. He didn't. He put down his fork and said calmly, "Danielle, that's not normal. You know that, right?" I didn't answer, but something shifted inside me that night. I met Nathan Cole at a professional conference in Baltimore for attorneys and forensic accountants. He was speaking about financial fraud cases. I was taking notes a few rows back. He wasn't flashy or loud like my father. He listened carefully and spoke with purpose, steady and thoughtful. We dated for 14 months before I brought him home. I should have expected what happened next. My father turned the living room into an interrogation within minutes, asking where Nathan went to school, how much he earned, whether his family had money. Nathan answered calmly without trying to impress anyone. Then my father leaned back and said, "I hope you're patient, son. My daughter needs someone to lead her." The air tightened. My mother stared at her hands. I started to speak, but Nathan beat me to it. With respect, sir, Danielle is the most capable person I know. He said it evenly, without anger, just simple truth. My father paused for a few long seconds before changing the subject. But I noticed it, the slight tension in his jaw, the brief flicker in his eyes. Nathan wasn't intimidated. And my father's whole world depended on being the most intimidating person in every room. That was the first crack in the foundation, even if none of us fully understood it yet. Nathan simply wasn't intimidated, and that made him my father's newest problem. He proposed on a quiet Sunday morning. No big show, no hidden ring, just coffee at our kitchen table and the simple words, "I want the rest of my life to look like this. Will you marry me?" I said yes before he even finished. We planned a small engagement gathering, maybe 15 or 20 friends in a backyard with wine and music. But 2 days later my father called and announced he had already booked the Whitfield, the same upscale venue he used for corporate events, complete with valet parking and marble floors. When I said we wanted something simple, he laughed and said he was paying so he'd handle it. My mom followed up with her gentle voice, asking me to let him do something nice. So I gave in like I always had. The guest list grew to 60. Mostly his country club friends and business contacts. My friends. 8. It wasn't my party anymore. It was his spotlight. The night before the event, Nathan reminded me it was still my celebration and I could change it, but I told him fighting now would only create more drama. He looked at me and said, "I'm marrying you, not your father. At some point you'll have to decide where the line is." Lying awake later, I remembered a story my mother once shared about how early in their marriage she challenged my dad and he responded by canceling her credit card for months until she learned her lesson. He told it like a casual memory, but that night I realized it was a warning. If I stayed silent, I would become her, smiling through disappointment, never pushing back. The next evening I stopped by my parents' house with the seating chart. My father was in his study, glasses on, writing on a yellow legal pad. I asked what he was working on. "Pie toast," he said without looking up. I asked if I could read it. He finally looked up at me and smiled, but it was the kind of smile that stopped at his lips and never reached his eyes. "You'll hear it tomorrow with everyone else," he said. A chill ran through me. "Dad, it's my engagement party. I think I have a right to know what you're going to say." His voice dropped into that quiet warning tone I knew too well. "Trust me, sweetheart. Everyone will remember this toast." My mother appeared in the doorway with her tea, instantly sensing the tension, and gently redirected the moment. "Your father gives wonderful speeches. Remember Uncle Joe's retirement?" I did remember. Dad had joked that Joe was retiring because nobody needed him anymore, not even his wife. The room laughed. Joe laughed. His wife didn't. That was my father's skill. He could cut someone down in public and make it sound charming. I left without arguing, grabbed my laptop bag from the car since I had an audit deadline Monday, and decided I'd finish work during setup like Nathan suggested. Neither of us knew that laptop would matter far more than spreadsheets. The next morning I was reviewing seating charts when the event coordinator emailed an updated guest list. 62 names. More of my father's golf partners, country club friends, business contacts, even a contractor he'd known for 6 months. Gerald and Patricia Marsh were seated front and center at table 1, right beside family. My college friends and coworkers? Table 8 near the kitchen. I called him immediately. "Dad, why are my friends in the back?" He replied calmly, "There wasn't room up front. I had to prioritize." "Prioritize who?" I asked. "This is a networking opportunity, not a sleepover. Don't be selfish," he snapped. I hung up, my hands trembling, not from anger but from that old feeling of being rearranged like furniture in someone else's house. Nathan watched quietly from across the room, jaw tight. "He's performing," Nathan said. "For Gerald and the rest of them. The proud father, the perfect family. We're part of the display." I looked at the list again. 62 names, and I felt like a prop at my own celebration. I closed the laptop, got dressed, and drove to the Whitfield an hour early. The space was polished and impressive. Brick walls, brass details, a long mahogany bar, and a projector screen already set up with a slideshow of family photos my father had chosen. It was exactly his style. And as I stood there taking it in, I realized this wasn't just a party. It was a stage. They were photos he had selected, moments he approved of, memories that fit his version of the story. I was fixing a centerpiece at table 3 when I heard his voice near the coat check. He was standing with Gerald Marsh, both of them holding drinks, speaking closely. I was just around the corner, out of sight. "I'm so proud of my little girl," my father said in that warm public voice he used so well. "She's everything I raised her to be." Gerald laughed and praised him for being such a devoted father. "Family first," my dad replied smoothly. I stood there frozen, the word proud echoing in my head. In 29 years he had never once said he was proud of me to my face. Not at graduation, not when I passed my CP, not when I earned my fraud certification. But here in a hallway, saying it to the very man whose money he had been quietly taking, that's where the word appeared. It wasn't affection. It was strategy. I set the centerpiece down and walked away without a scene. I didn't cry. I stored it like I stored everything else, filed away until it felt permanent. What I didn't realize then was that Gerald Marsh, who believed he was praising a loyal partner and proud father, had been losing hundreds of thousands of dollars through a scheme my father had carefully built. And I had the proof sitting on my laptop in the trunk of my car. 3 months earlier, I had been deep into a forensic audit for a real estate client flagged for suspicious payments. It was routine at first. Tracking wires, reviewing shell companies, untangling layered accounts. Then I noticed a Delaware LLC with no website, no staff, and barely any filings, yet it was moving large, steady monthly transfers. I followed the trail. That company linked to a holding group. That holding group shared a registered agent with another entity. 3 layers down, hidden behind paperwork, the path led straight to Upton and Marsh Construction, my father's company. I sat alone in the quiet office, coffee cold, cleaning crew working down the hall, staring at the screen. My training took over before my emotions could. As a certified fraud examiner, I don't get to ignore evidence. It's not optional. I saved the documents, drove home, and sat in my dark driveway gripping the steering wheel, knowing my life had just shifted. Inside, I opened a private folder on my personal laptop and named it Project Atlas. For weeks, after work and in silence, I traced every transfer and documented every gap. I built a full report the same way I would for any client. Only this time the subject wasn't a stranger. It was my father that I didn't tell anyone at first. For 2 weeks I carried it alone. But the pressure started showing. I was waking up at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, replaying numbers in my head, double-checking entries I already knew were correct. The accountant in me understood exactly what the data proved. The daughter in me kept searching for another explanation. There wasn't one. One Tuesday night I finally sat Nathan down at our kitchen table and showed him the summary. He read it carefully like he reads everything. Once for the facts, once for what they mean. When he finished he asked one simple question. "How much?" I told him it was hard to calculate without full access, but based on what I could trace, it was substantial and had likely been happening for over a decade. He placed the papers down gently. "What do you want to do?" I didn't have an answer. "He's my father," I said. Nathan didn't criticize him or label him. He leaned forward and said, "He's also taking money from a man who trusts him. Gerald's been his partner for 15 years. I stared at the table, following the wood grain with my eyes. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," Nathan said. "But don't wait too long. Gerald deserves the truth." I knew he was right. My plan was simple. Finish documenting everything, get through the engagement party, and on Monday morning deliver the report to Gerald privately and professionally. No drama. Just facts. A few days later, Nathan reminded me to bring my laptop to the party so I could send my client file before dinner. It was a normal, practical suggestion. Neither of us realized how important that decision would become. Saturday evening arrived and the Whitfield looked flawless. Candles glowing on every table, white orchids arranged perfectly, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. My father had spared no expense. When Richard Upton puts on a show, he does it well. Nathan and I walked in together. I wore a cream silk dress I had chosen carefully, and Nathan's steady hand rested at my back as we entered. My father greeted us in the foyer, champagne glass ready, smile in place. "There she is. My beautiful girl." He hugged me for a full 3 seconds, his expensive cologne filling the air. He had never once called me beautiful growing up. Not at prom. Not at graduation. But in front of Gerald and Patricia Marsh, suddenly I was his pride and joy. I hugged him back because that's what you do in public. Gerald congratulated me warmly and mentioned that my father had been talking about this party nonstop. I thanked him and said I was glad he came, and I truly was, though for reasons he couldn't yet imagine. Once Nathan and I were seated, he squeezed my hand gently. I leaned toward him and whispered, "He's performing." About 2 weeks later I finally told Nathan, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't keep carrying it by myself. I hadn't been sleeping, waking up at 3 in the morning and staring at the ceiling while running numbers through my head and questioning every document I had reviewed. The accountant in me understood exactly what the records were saying, but the daughter in me kept hoping there was some harmless explanation I had missed. There wasn't. One Tuesday night I asked Nathan to sit with me at the kitchen table and showed him the summary I had prepared. He read it carefully, the way he reads everything, once to understand the facts and again to think about what they meant. When he finished, he looked at me and asked how serious it was. I told him I couldn't know the full amount without complete access, but what I had traced pointed to a large sum over many years. He set the papers down and gently asked what I wanted to do. I admitted I didn't know because the person involved was my father. Nathan stayed calm, didn't judge, and didn't say anything harsh. Instead, he reminded me that this wasn't only about family, it was also about a longtime business partner who trusted him. That hit me hard. We agreed I would finish the audit, prepare a complete report, attend the engagement party as planned, and then meet Gerald on Monday to present everything clearly and professionally. A few days before the event, Nathan suggested I bring my laptop so I could keep working since the deadline was close. It sounded practical at the time, simple and reasonable. I had no idea that my father had plans of his own for that evening, plans that would change everything and force my hand sooner than I expected. I placed my hand on Nathan's arm, calm but firm, and quietly told him not to step in because I could handle it. The silence in the room felt heavy. A few guests at the back awkwardly lifted their glasses out of habit, but most kept their hands still. Mark, Nathan's best man, slowly set his glass down as if drawing a line. Nathan's mother, Helen, looked straight at my mother with open disbelief, not anger, just shock at what she had heard. My mother avoided her eyes. My father was still standing with his glass raised, scanning the room. He could sense the mood had shifted, but instead of easing off, he pushed harder. With a forced smile, he said it was only a joke and that of course I knew he cared about me, then looked at me expecting support. 60 pairs of eyes turned in my direction. I held his gaze for several long seconds before speaking clearly and calmly, telling him to sit down. He tried to brush it off and called me dramatic, but I repeated myself in the same steady tone. The room was so quiet that no one missed a word. He looked around for someone to back him up and found no one. Slowly, he lowered himself into his chair. It was the first time I had ever seen him follow my lead. I stood up, straightened my dress, and walked toward the front where I had left my laptop earlier, originally planning to send a work file during the party. The short walk felt endless under everyone's watchful eyes. I opened my bag, took out the laptop, and connected it to the projector he had prepared for his cheerful family slideshow. The screen lit up, replacing staged vacation photos with my folder labeled Project Atlas. My hands stayed steady even though my heart was racing. Without turning around when he demanded to know what I was doing, I faced the room and explained that since he had just questioned my worth in front of everyone, it was only fair that the same audience see the full truth. Then I opened the file. The screen lit up with a clean white page and bold black text at the top. Forensic Audit Summary, Unauthorized Fund Transfers, Upton and Marsh Construction LLC. Gerald Marsh's hand trembled, and his champagne glass tilted slightly as he read the heading. I didn't make a long speech because I didn't need to. I calmly explained that this report was the result of 3 months of detailed review and that it outlined repeated unauthorized transfers from the company my father co-owned with Gerald. I scrolled to a page showing neat columns of dates, amounts, and destination accounts, covering nearly 10 years. The layout was simple and precise, and the figures were clear enough on their own. My father jumped up so quickly that his chair scraped loudly across the marble floor. He called the whole thing absurd and insisted I didn't understand what I was presenting, his voice louder and sharper than anyone there had likely heard before. I turned to face him and, without hesitation, reminded him that I am a certified fraud examiner and that reviewing financial misconduct is my profession. The room didn't erupt, it went still. People quietly processed what they were seeing, leaning toward one another, whispering under their breath. Then a sharp crash broke the silence as Gerald's glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Patricia grabbed his arm, but he didn't look at her. He stared at the screen, his face drained of color as if years of trust were unraveling in front of him. When he finally looked at my father, his expression wasn't angry yet. It was the stunned look of someone realizing something serious had been hidden for a very long time. My father hurried toward him, palms open, trying to frame the situation as a misunderstanding and claiming I was upset over a joke. Gerald didn't raise his voice. He simply lifted one hand to stop him and said a single word, "Don't." His voice shook slightly, and that small tremor carried more meaning than any shout could have. He then took out his phone and calmly called someone, asking them to meet at the office first thing Monday to discuss the partnership. After ending the call, he placed the phone on the table and avoided looking at my father. Desperate, my father turned to my mother and demanded that she defend him and say I was wrong. She sat motionless, hands folded, eyes down, and said nothing. The same quiet she had given me for years she now gave to him, and in that silence, everything shifted. For the first time her silence wasn't shielding anyone, it was giving permission. Chairs scraped across the floor and guests at the far tables quietly stood, gathered their coats and purses and slipped toward the exits. No dramatic gestures, just a steady, unmistakable withdrawal from a room that no longer wanted to be present. Nathan stepped up beside me, silent, his hand resting gently between my shoulder blades. Then Helen Cole, Nathan's mother, rose from table 2. She walked over, took both my hands in hers and said, "I'm proud of you, sweetheart." Just 4 words, but more meaningful than anything I had waited to hear from my father. Gerald Marsh rose slowly, steadying himself with a hand on the table, not from weakness but from holding himself together. He approached my father, the two of them standing face to face as the room thinned. Maybe 50 people left now, some already quietly gone. Gerald's voice was low, calm, precise, the voice of a man measuring every word for its impact. 15 years I trusted you, he said. My father tried to speak, fast and panicked, explaining transfers as restructuring and accountant's advice, but Gerald almost laughed. Your daughter is a forensic accountant, Richard, and she just showed me what your accountant was hiding, he said quietly. My father opened his mouth again, but no words came. Gerald straightened his tie, adjusted his jacket, and added in a controlled tone, "My lawyer will be in touch Monday morning. Don't call me. Don't come to the office. Don't contact me." He turned to Patricia, who had been standing nearby, ready. She had known her moment after 35 years of marriage, but instead of leaving immediately she came to me, squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for telling the truth, Danielle. I know what it cost you." I nodded, my throat tight. Then the Marshes left and the room watched them go. No one said a word to my father. No one shook his hand. He was left standing in the center of the room, the projector behind him still casting the audit summary across his back like a shadow. Tables emptied, coats were collected, cars started in the lot. By 9 o'clock the room was nearly deserted. The string quartet had packed up 20 minutes earlier, and the catering staff quietly cleared unfinished plates. My mother sat at the head table, unmoved, still, calm. My father, jacket off, tie loose, held an untouched glass of whiskey. I closed my laptop, unplugged the HDMI and slipped it back into my bag. My hands shook now, not from the adrenaline of the moment but from the weight it left behind. I walked to the center of the room. He looked at me, eyes red, a mix of fury and something deeper. "You just destroyed your own father," he said. I met his gaze steadily. "No, Dad," I said. "You destroyed yourself. I just stopped covering for you. Over a joke? You did all this over a joke? This isn't about the toast," and even he knew it. He turned to my mother, desperate for backup. "Last card, final move. Linda, you're going to let her do this to me?" My mother looked up from her plate and for the first time in 30 years of marriage she spoke. "You did this, Richard." Not her. Just 7 quiet, calm words, almost gentle, but they landed like a verdict. My father's face changed in a way I had never seen. He didn't cry, he didn't yell, but he went blank, like a man who had run out of people to blame. Nathan was by the door holding my coat as I picked up my bag. "Goodbye, Dad," I said. No answer. We stepped into the November night together. The air was sharp, clean, and I breathed deeply, like I had finally surfaced after 29 years underwater. My hands shook, not from triumph but from the weight of it all. Monday arrived quickly. Gerald's attorney, Raymond Stein, showed up at Upton and Marsh at 8 a.m. with a court order for a full forensic audit by an independent firm, clean, professional, untouchable. My report had started it, but the follow-through needed to be official. By Tuesday, the story was everywhere in town, quietly spreading through whispers and phone calls. Did you hear? People had always felt something was off. By Wednesday, Richard Upton was removed entirely from the Ridgewood Country Club membership roster. 22 years of dues, charity events and golf privileges, gone in one vote. Those who had smiled and shaken hands at his engagement party tables started quietly cutting ties. No statements, no announcements, just unreturned calls and cancelled lunches. The news didn't make headlines, it didn't need to. The party itself had been the story. 60 witnesses, 60 accounts, each one carrying the truth outward. Richard called me 11 times that week. I didn't answer. The 12th went to voicemail. Danielle, you need to fix this. Call me back now. I listened once, deleted it and set the phone down, screen face down. Nathan glanced over but didn't ask. He didn't need to. For the first time, my silence was mine to give. The independent audit took 6 weeks. When the final report arrived, it confirmed every detail in my file, and more. $837,000 siphoned over 10 years through shell companies, small monthly transfers designed to avoid detection, funding a life that wasn't his from the lake house to the boat, and the country club membership he no longer held. In January, Gerald filed a civil lawsuit against my father for breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and misappropriation of partnership funds. His attorney told Nathan quietly that a criminal referral to the district attorney was being considered. My father hired a top defense lawyer, but with his assets frozen because of the civil case, he burned through his personal savings in just 2 months. By March, Upton and Marsh construction was suspended, operations halted and contracts voided. The 12 employees my father once boasted about were suddenly collecting unemployment. Then the lake house, the one he'd shown off during 4th of July parties, where he bragged about building everything from nothing, went up for sale. Nathan showed me the listing one evening. I glanced at it for a few seconds, then closed the tab. You okay? He asked. I didn't do this to him, I said. He did it to himself. Nathan nodded. I know, but it still doesn't feel good. It wasn't supposed to. Justice isn't meant to feel like celebration. It feels like a heavy door finally closing. Final, necessary, unavoidable. But the heaviest moment came 2 weeks later, out of nowhere, in the form of a Sunday afternoon call from my mother. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Her voice was quieter than usual, smaller yet clearer, as if she'd finally set down a weight she'd carried for decades. Hi, Mom, I said. A long pause, then she spoke. I should have said this 30 years ago. I'm sorry. I see what he did to you, every time. And I told myself it was his way of caring, but I was wrong. I leaned against the counter, heart racing. Mom, let me finish, please, she continued. What you did at that party, standing up like that. I've never been that brave. Watching you, it opened something in me. I didn't say it was okay, it wasn't. I told her, I love you, Mom, but love isn't enough anymore. I need you to show me. Silence followed, then she admitted she'd started seeing a therapist. Last week was her first session. My eyes stung as she spoke. That's a good start, Mom, I said. We talked carefully for 20 minutes. Like walking across fragile ice, aware every step could crack. 2 days later, my father sent one last message. The final words I would ever receive from Richard Upton. You chose a stranger over your own blood. I read it twice before it fully sank in. That message, bitter and desperate, confirmed everything. Gerald Marsh, his partner of 15 years, his friend, the man whose money he stole, had finally forced the truth into the open. My father still called Gerald a stranger. Richard Upton never understood trust, only control. And when control slipped from his hands, he had nothing left. I deleted the text and didn't look back. 6 months after the party, Nathan and I threw our own celebration, simple and ours. Not at the Whitfield, not at any fancy venue, just Nathan's parents' backyard. 15 people, string lights from the hardware store, burgers on the grill, and a playlist we'd made together on a lazy Sunday morning. No projector, no slideshow, no assigned seating. My friends, Emily, Jasmine, and the crew from work, sat on lawn chairs sipping beer from cans, laughing freely. Nathan's mom, Helen, brought her famous lemon bars, And Mark gave a 3-sentence toast that had everyone laughing for real. My mother came too, carrying a dish she'd cooked herself, something she hadn't done in years because my father always ordered catering. She was quiet, careful with her words, but fully present. My father wasn't invited. Halfway through the evening, the doorbell rang. A delivery. Flowers, a huge arrangement of white peonies with a card. I held it in my hands for a long time. Nathan came up behind me. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaky. I spent 29 years trying to earn one word from my father. And here's Gerald Marsh giving me something my dad never could. Nathan wrapped his arm around me. "Some people build. Some people take. You can't change which one your father chose to be." I pressed my face into his shoulder and cried, real tears, the first since the party. Not out of sadness exactly, but because something locked inside me for 29 years had finally opened and it had to come out. 15 people who actually wanted to be there. That's all I ever needed. People ask if I regret what I did. I do, but not for the reasons you think. I don't regret the truth. I don't regret standing up. I regret that my father forced me to choose between loyalty and honesty, a choice no child should ever have to make. I didn't project the audit to get revenge. My original plan was clean, private, professional. Monday morning, face-to-face with Gerald. But when my father humiliated me in front of everyone I loved, turning my engagement party into a performance where he was the star and I was the punchline, something shifted. Not anger, something deeper. I realized that if I stayed silent, I'd swallow everything forever. I had been silent about 2 things, how my father treated me and what he had done to Gerald. And in that moment I understood they came from the same source. Silence protects only those who abuse it, and I was done protecting him. Fear. That's what kept me silent for so long. The fear of losing a father who was never really mine. Silence isn't loyalty. Silence is complicity. I learned that at a dinner party, watching my mother fold her napkin and smile while letting things slide. If any of this feels familiar to you, if you know what it's like to shrink yourself so someone else can feel big, I won't tell you what to do. That's your choice. But I will say this. Setting a boundary with your family doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you love yourself enough to say, I won't accept this anymore. And sometimes, that simple sentence is the bravest thing a person can speak. Here's where I am now. Nathan and I are getting married next month. A small ceremony, just 30 guests, every single one of them chosen by us. No one took over planning, no one needed to. My mother is still in therapy and we talk once or twice a week. It's careful work, like learning to walk again after being stuck too long, but she's trying to be the mother I need now, and I'm learning to let her. Gerald's civil case is moving forward. I don't follow every detail. I gave my deposition last month. Professional, fact-based, no emotion, just the numbers. The numbers speak for themselves. My father sold the lake house. I heard he's renting a small apartment alone. My mother moved in with her sister. And my father hasn't contacted me since that last text. I don't expect him to. The man who spent 29 years controlling every conversation finally met one he couldn't manage. I'm not a hero. I didn't plan some perfect takedown. I'm a woman who got pushed too far on the wrong night and had the evidence to stand up for herself. That's the whole story. Some days I wake up and miss the father I imagined, the one who taught me to ride a bike and meant it, the one who said proud and wasn't performing. That father never existed, but the grief is real. If you're watching this and know what it's like to mourn someone who's still alive, I see you. You're allowed to grieve and move forward at the same time. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who finally told the truth. And the truth turned out to be enough.